very low-key individual. He's kind of a geek in his, in his temperament. He's very intellectual. He strikes me as someone who went to S4, which is what he has said. I have spoken to individuals who on the private have said to me that their intelligence sources tell them that yes, indeed, Bob Lazar was at S4. Now, whether he saw all of the things that he has claimed to see, that is, flying saucers, basically, and the briefings that he says he read, that may be a different story. I tend to find credibility there. Now, there are other issues. It's true. His education, his claimed education at MIT. There's no evidence that this was true at all. What's going on with that? I don't know. I don't know the stories. I don't know the full story, let's say, of what is this enigma of a man. But I do know, George, that you and a number of other journalists have cultivated contacts with inside Groom Lake, and I know that you, for example, you said that you've interviewed about a dozen or so insiders who have corroborated large parts of what Bob Lazar says, right? But just none of these people want to go public.
That's true. It's actually more than 24 now. I think Bob's story was never going to be confirmed or proven or disproven one way or another. It's going to always be a question mark for folks. I do know this, is that as we're discussing disinformation, he's been dismissed by a lot of people because, well, we think that he was just trying to distract attention away from something else that was going on at Area 51. And if that were the case, someone should have their butt kicked because it was a miserable failure. Because as a result of Bob's stories, there are people, it's been 19 years now, there are people out in the desert watching for whatever is flying around at Groom Lake. There's been incredible scrutiny, congressional scrutiny, media scrutiny. So if they wanted to distract attention away from whatever's going on there, it was a miserable failure.
No, it's been absolutely heightened. Another person a journalist that I think really did some important work on this was James Goodall, who did a lot of writing for Jane's Defense Weekly, Aviation Weekly, Space Technology, and a number of other very highly reputable publications. And I know that in the mid-1980s and into the early 90s, he also was interviewing a number of Groom Lake insiders who told him that, yes, absolutely, positively, UFOs exist, better than Star Trek. One person said to him, we have things out there that are better than Star Trek or anything you can see in the movies.
That would make George Lucas drool.
Exactly. So now none of these would constitute proof. We understand that. But when you get responsible journalists cultivating sources, you have to understand these people are not just going to give their names out. They can't do that. They're violating security oaths, or they're putting themselves at risk in some way. So, this is what it looks like. It looks like there is some very advanced stuff. And the story comes down to the fact that not only then have we retrieved exotic alien technology, but we've been trying to replicate it. And of course we would. I mean, you wouldn't expect the powers that be simply to sit on this stuff and look at it. Wow, what a nice flying saucer. They're going to try to figure out how to make it work with our science and with our materials. And so this is a very logical thing you'd expect. And indeed, these are the leaks that have been coming out for over 2 decades.
We're talking about disinformation and misinformation. It always is amazing to me that how easily it goes over. That you mentioned earlier this report that came out from the ex-FBI guy about cattle mutilations, and it was poor research. But media, scientists will latch on to anything that makes it easier to explain this stuff away, and they don't give nearly the kind of scrutiny to the flimsy explanation as they do to the original topic.
No, it's true, and it's sad. I mean, people, we like to think that we've really got it all together, but we're pretty simple creatures when you get right down to it. Even the scientists and the academicians, they all got a job to do. They all go home. They all have dinner. They all hang out with their family. How much effort do these people really want to put into investigating something that is going to change their worldview? I mean, go back any period of human history. Just throw a dart on the map of the human history, and whatever era you land on, you're going to know that people have held beliefs that were wrong. And not just regular folks, but brilliant folks. They have all kinds of wrong beliefs. So the question that I often ask myself is, how many new revelations about your worldview is any person really willing to take in their lifetime? I think there's a limit to what a lot of people can handle. Not everyone's the same, and admittedly, but I think that in general, once someone hits adulthood, they like to think that they've got it all figured out, and they end up spending the rest of their lives filling the blanks of what they think they know. So when you get to be 50 and you're some responsible scientist, and the last thing that you want is for some outsider of your field to blow your paradigm to pieces, and then you've realized that you've spent your whole life missing the boat on this big thing. I mean, who wants to come to that? So I think psychologically, there's a very strong disposition for people not to question the big picture. Once that's been put together, I think they want to just stay with that. There are always exceptions, absolutely, but in general, we're up against entrenched psychology here.
Well, as also in our discussion of disclosure, and you and I are both on the same page. The First Amendment is sort of my religion. I would be in favor of freedom of information and disclosure and things of that sort. And then you have to ask the question, disclosure of what? Because we don't know what the ultimate truth is, the big picture of this story is. And, I guess it is remotely possible that it could cause significant disruptions of society, depending on what the truth is.
Yeah. I think it will. In the short term, I think it will cause a lot of disruption. That's not a reason to avoid it, though.
Right.
Now, if you're pulling the strings and if you're in charge of that society, it may be a good reason, in your opinion, to hold back. For the rest of us, I think. I mean, my argument for a long time now has been that the cover-up of the UFO phenomenon, it's easy to see why it could have started for legitimate reasons. If you're trying to figure this all out in the 1940s, you may want to have time to decide, how serious is this, and we need to keep this away from the Soviets. We don't want them to get the technology, and so on and so on. But the problem is that the secrecy on this has a corrosive effect, I believe, on our political system, and so that it has forced the creation of extra-constitutional means of maintaining that secret, so that members of Congress, by and large, are cut out of the process. The American public is cut out of the process. This is an important thing. It's gone on for 60 years without our informed consent as to what's actually happening. Now, at a certain point, you've got to ask yourself, where do you draw the line? Okay? There is legitimate need for secrecy at times, but for 60 years? How long are we supposed to go here? This is very certainly the largest single issue, once it comes out, that would affect our lives in so many ways. It would transform our world, and there's a balance here, and the balance, I think, now has to come down on the side of the public's right to know what goes on. This is supposed to be a republic. It's supposed to be a democracy. That means the people are supposed to rule, and the people can't rule if they don't have sufficient knowledge about their world.
Well put, Richard Dolan. We're going to take a break, and when we come back, we're going to open up the phone lines for your questions for Richard Dolan, author of UFOs and the National Security State. Stay with us on Coast to Coast AM. Welcome back, everyone. Words of wisdom there from Bob Marley. Don't worry, and we'll put them in the context of the UFO stuff. A lot of folks think or suspect that that society, in particular American society, has sort of been conditioned to accept this over a long period of time. UFO movies and TV programs and abduction specials and books and all this stuff in the media getting us ready for ultimate truth. However, years ago, as we're waiting to go to the phones, years ago there was a report that came out from the Brookings Institute that had a little bit in it that mentioned that there could be severe upheavals, social collapse, if our contact with a superior intelligence were confirmed. Richard Dolan, our guest, you've read that, of course.
That came out circa 1960.
And do you find it odd that was included in that report?
Well, it's extremely noteworthy for that reason, because the Brookings Institute does not typically write about matters pertaining to the revelation of an extraterrestrial reality. So it's something you remember. I think when we talk about, are we being prepared by Hollywood, presumably in conjunction with the government? Are they trying to prepare us for the reality of UFOs or not? I go back and forth on this. Now, you could look at it that they are sort of broaching the issue, and sometimes in a very serious fashion at times, and other times not so much. On the other hand, you could also say